Concentrate. You learned Lumos quite fast. Accio should be a breeze if you concentrate well enough. I took a deep breath, trying to focus on the dummy that Draco had transfigured right in front of me. I knew I had to prove to everyone that I was more than capable of catching up with the rest. The pressure I felt was greater than ever before, but somehow I knew I could do it. Accio! Yet, I don't know how I did it. I felt a surge of energy through my veins as I pointed my wand at the dummy and felt it creak ever so slightly toward me. It dragged along the floor, making a squeaking noise as it came closer until I was able to touch it with my fingertips. I did it! I squealed. Professor Malfoy stood up from his seat. He didn't seem as excited as I was. What are you celebrating for? That was just the basics. Being scolded was nothing new, but I didn't know how to respond to being called out that way. I stammered. Speak clearly, he demanded. Yes, sir, I'm only celebrating because this is the closest I've ever gotten to having something move around by itself, I stated. Look carefully at how I do it, he ordered, slightly nudging me aside as he made the dummy go back to its original standing spot. Without breaking a sweat, he pointed the wand at the dummy and yelled out the incantation. Accio! He yelled. This time the dummy flew a few centimeters up and came to us at the speed of light. I jumped back. I wasn't expecting it to work so fast. This is how you use Accio, he repeated himself, waving his wand around to return the dummy to its original state. Now do it again. Accio. Squeaking sounds. All the dummy did was slightly jerk up. Accio. No movement. My heart began to pound even faster. Accio. Nothing. I felt beads of sweat start to form on my face, my arms becoming slightly limp, and my heart pounding. Failure meant pain and humiliation. I couldn't fail 4 times in a row in front of Professor Malfoy. Please work! Accio! I yelled desperately, my voice cracking as the dummy simply shook itself. I felt my knees shaking and feeling unable to lift myself up. I put my head down, panting, frustrated, feeling thousands of eyes on me as I could not keep up. I heard Professor Malfoy click his tongue and kneel down right next to me. I tensed up, ready to get a lashing. Overreact much? He pointed out, making my fear completely disappear. Stand up, or I'll show you how it's done again. I let out a sigh of relief as I realized that Professor Malfoy, as cold as he could be, was not like my father. He wasn't going to hit me for failing to do what was told. Part of spellcasting isn't just saying the correct word, it is also the correct wand movement and posture, he said, standing directly behind me. He slid his arms around mine, taking a hold of my hand and wand. I could feel his breathing against my neck, and I felt my heart pound the moment his skin grazed mine. He made a simple wand movement and then pulled away. Do it like that, he ordered. I shook my head. I had no idea what had just happened to me or why I felt my stomach turn in a different way, but I focused on the dummy again. Accio! The dummy levitated and flew over towards me at the speed of light, just like it did with Professor Malfoy. I jumped back, staring back at it with amazement and awe. I had finally done it correctly. Well done, Professor Malfoy congratulated me. Try it on different objects. I looked around his office. I noticed there were a few books on the shelves, so I decided to practice with them. Accio! And the books came flying towards my hands. Seems like you've gotten mostly the hang of it, he pointed out, taking the books out of my hands. Remember, this spell doesn't work on people, only on objects. I couldn't help but think about the class I had observed the day before. I admit I was a bit confused with the classes taught at Hogwarts, especially the one he specifically taught, Defense Against the Dark Arts. Professor Malfoy, may I ask what Defense Against the Dark Arts is? I dared ask. Malfoy raised an eyebrow. You're asking that now, he asked. Well, I teach how to cast defensive and protective spells, as well as how to properly handle and deal with dark creatures. Dark creatures. You know, Inferi, Dementors, Boggarts, Acromantulas. He numbered. I blinked twice. By Merlin's beard! You're truly clueless. Professor Malfoy's eyes widened as he realised I was truly raised as a muggle, despite my magical abilities. I thought you were just exaggerating when telling me about your past, but you're truly clueless about our world. I would not lie, sir, I promised. Malfoy turned around to look for a book in his private library. He ran his fingers through every book, mumbling under his breath until he reached a special book. Ah, here, he said, turning around. I teach first years with this book. The book was heavy. I noticed it the moment he passed it on to me. It was hardcover with silver ridges. The name? Defense Against the Dark Arts, Year 1. I could tell it was extremely old and had been used by many professors throughout the years. Oh, it's a bit heavy, I commented. If you're going to be my student, you better get used to heavy reading. You were incredibly lucky to be given this chance. Don't waste it, he ordered. I nodded. Yes, sir, I answered. There was a sudden knock on the door. Headmistress McGonagall opened the door without waiting for an answer, her eyes full of fear. Professor Malfoy straightened his spine, fixing his posture the moment he saw her. Professor Malfoy, a word, please, she said. Professor Malfoy followed her orders, closing the door behind him. I took this opportunity to open the book to the first page, sliding my finger throughout each word. What are the dark arts? The dark arts are spells and practices intended to harm, manipulate, or dominate others. These include, but are not limited to, curses, hexes, jinxes, and the use of dark creatures. The intent behind these spells is malevolent, aiming to inflict pain, control the mind, or even cause death. The door suddenly opened wide. The way it hit the wall startled me slightly and almost had the book fall out of my hand. Professor Malfoy also seemed as concerned as Headmistress McGonagall. I must leave, Professor Malfoy said. Oh, I muttered. This doesn't mean you get to leave scot-free. I expect you to read the first 3 chapters. I will test you tomorrow on your knowledge. Understood? He asked. Yes, sir. I fiddled with my wand a bit. I had just read about a useful spell to defend myself if I was ever in trouble or being attacked. Protego seemed useful to know, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to cast it without Professor Malfoy's help. Protego, I stuttered. Nothing happened. I flicked my wand again, this time with more confidence. Protego, I yelled out. It slightly worked. Blue flickering lights, like energy bolts, formed a small shield in front of me that disappeared in a matter of seconds. I knew it was still a failed attempt at a spell, but I still felt like I was progressing. Okay, I've kind of have that down, I muttered to myself, reading the next spell as I roamed his office like a caged lion. Next one... Incendio? No way Professor Malfoy would let me try that out in his office. Out of the blue, I heard a scream coming from outside the window, followed by a hard impact and something hitting the ground. It seemed to come from a girl, and the grunts and desperate pleas for help did not pass me. I ran to the window, opening it wide. I couldn't see anything except the green field right in front of me, until I heard the grunts and pleas come from below. I saw the top of a girl's head. Her black curly hair was loose, waving from side to side as she desperately tried to pull herself up. I recognised her the moment she looked up. Vivien was holding onto a flagpole a few feet below the office window. She felt her grip loosen ever so slightly, so she began to panic. She kept trying to pull herself up, but every time she was closer to reaching safety, she fell back down. She kept grunting, trying desperately to save herself from harm. "It's you!" she yelled out the moment our eyes locked. "Please, help me!" she begged. I looked around me, trying to find a way to pull her back up. She had lost her broom behind her, and her wand was nowhere to be found. "Hold on!" I exclaimed. "I wasn't planning on letting go!" She yelled angrily, yet still holding on to that sarcasm. I thought about using a Keo to bring her up to me, but Malfoy's instructions replayed in my mind. That spell was only for inanimate objects. The next best thing was to throw a rope over the window to pull her through, so I threw my sheets out, grasping onto them with my life. She managed to let one hand go of the pole and onto the bedsheet, then using her legs to climb upwards as I pulled and pulled. Vivien finally managed to reach the windowsill. She pulled herself into the classroom, falling over the window in exhaustion. She landed on the wooden floor, panting, holding onto her chest in a panicked state. "Oh, my Merlin, you saved me," I kept panting. She praised me to the adrenaline I felt. I could have ended up in the infirmary with broken bones or worse, dead. "Don't mention it," I managed to say. Vivien took a good look at me, her face lit up as soon as she recognised who I was. "I remember you. You're the girl I met on the Hogwarts Express," she pointed out. "You're Alanza Campbell. What are you doing here? Where's Professor Malfoy?" "Oh, She glanced over at the bed Professor Malfoy had transfigured from his desk for me. She raised an eyebrow, slightly smirking and placing her hand on her hip. "A bed? Isn't this Professor Malfoy's office? I know for a fact he doesn't sleep here," she said. I scratched the back of my head. Got something to confess?" she asked. My eyes widened as my cheeks flushed when I realised what she was insinuating. "Oh no, nothing like that. It's just a difficult topic to talk about," I clarified, trying to change the topic. How did you end up hanging off there?" Vivien's eyes widened, almost as if she had realised something important. "Oh no, my broom!" she yelled out, running out of the office in a state of panic. I felt obligated to follow her to try and help her. She was the only other student in Hogwarts who knew my name, and she was the only one who was making an effort to get to know me. She took me through all of the hallways, the grand staircase which changed steps the moment she stepped on them. I was practicing my broom skills to try out for the Slytherin Quidditch team, she explained as she sprinted down the stairs. "And my broom just bugged out. I don't know what happened. It never does that." I raised an eyebrow. "Quidditch? What's that?" Vivien kept on running towards the same direction but slightly jerked her head up. "What do you mean?" I realised Quidditch was probably something extremely important and well known throughout the wizard world, which meant I was sticking out like a sore thumb. You and I need to have an important conversation. I have a feeling there's more to you than meets the eye," she stated. We eventually got to the field, where her supposed broom laid broken in half. She kneeled to the floor, picking up the pieces with a heartbroken expression on her face. "Oh, Merlin, it's broken in half. How does this even happen?" she exclaimed. "They're gonna kill me." You fly on brooms," I pointed out, slightly amazed. "What kind of question is that? On what else would we fly?" she asked me. "I mean, I know we can fly on hippogriffs, but... I laughed awkwardly, trying to give out a believable excuse. I wasn't good at lying, per se. I had never had to lie up to that point. I'm sorry, I had a brain fart. Vivien blinked twice, seeing right through me. Something about her made me feel... small. It almost looked like she knew all of my deepest and darkest secrets and thoughts. She knew I was lying to her. She put a hand on her hip, tilting her head as she stared me down. She was much smaller than me, yet so much more intimidating. I'm going to ask a question, and I need you to be 100% honest with me, she warned me. Are you a muggle that somehow snuck in here? I scratched my head. No, not exactly, Vivien. A squib? She asked again. I shook my head. No, none of that. Well, then I'm afraid I don't understand. You barely know anything about the wizard world. It's like you live under a rock. Vivien. I couldn't hold back this secret any longer, not while I was being interrogated by her. I'm not a muggle. I was just raised like one until a few days ago. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I'm a witch, just like you. My father's family were also witches, but he hid it from me. I'm now Professor Malfoy's personal student, I blurted out. Please, I'm trusting you with this secret. Nobody else should know. Vivien blinked twice, trying to process the information I had blurted out. My mind was racing, wondering what she would respond and how she would react with this information. Would she keep it to herself? Would she run off to tell everyone she knew? Professor Malfoy would be so mad if he found out I told someone what was going on between us. You want to fly? She finally asked. Out of all the possible reactions and things she could have said, that was the last thing I expected. What? You said you were raised as a muggle, right? Means you haven't flown on a broom. It's quite fun, actually. You'll have a class sooner or later. I don't know if I should. I stuttered. It did seem like a fun activity, but I was afraid it would somehow get me in trouble with my great-grand-aunt. Nonsense. Look, I'll teach you. It'll make me look good in front of the captains of the Quidditch team. They're all taking notes of the flyers, and I'm trying to get into the Slytherin team, Vivien joked. Come on, I'll show you around.